2017 in the boardroom. Roll call.
Trustee Peck. Trustee Ruane.
Here.
Trustee Wajowski.
Here.
Trustee Benucci.
Here.
Trustee Lamb.
Here.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're seeking a motion to appoint Trustee Lamb as this evening's chair.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Trustee Ruane.
Yes.
Trustee Wajowski.
Yes.
Trustee Benucci.
Yes.
Trustee Lamb.
Yes.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole workshop held on February 13th.
So move. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Presidential comments?
As temporary president, I have one comment. We received a letter dated February 9th, 2017 from the Government Finance Officers Association based in Chicago. The letter reads, Dear Mr. Collins, we are pleased to notify you that your comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended 2016 qualifies for a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in government accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. They will present the formal award later, but it's a really significant accomplishment for the staff. Second year in a row, third year in a row? Second year in a row? Okay. It's very impressive, the top recognition we can get, and it's well deserved.
Trustees' comments?
I would just like to say, I think that's a great accomplishment. We thank you very much, Administrator Murphy, Tracy Pleckham, all your hard work over there. Brian's pointing to you, but everything here is a team effort across the board, I'm sure, with all the department heads. So thank you very much for that hard work. We'd like to wish Mayor Collins a speedy recovery. He's doing fine from his knee surgery, so things are rolling along there. So other than that, that's all I have to say.
Murphy enjoys your coattails, Miss Pleckham.
I would just say congratulations to Tracy and your team as well. Nice job.
Are there any other trustee comments? If not, this will be the time for public comments. If there are no public comments, then we'll proceed with the workshop meeting. First item on the agenda is 2017-2018 draft fiscal year budget.
Thank you. This is a continuation of our discussions related to the budget. I believe we're nearing the end of the budget process, and Tracy will talk a little bit about some scheduling towards next month, public hearing as well related to the budget too as well. But tonight is just an informal ongoing discussion about the budget. First item that we wanted to touch on was water and sewer. The Water and Sewer Fund. Now, the Water and Sewer Fund, we did talk about operations back in October, but we didn't talk about the capital side related to water and sewer. So we wanted to touch on that tonight. Wanted to then transition in and talk a little bit about the Village Green area, the area generally south of Lockport Street in the more historic part of the downtown. And because of some of the issues with the older utilities there, it does work well with the water and sewer discussion. And then after that, we'd like to talk about the capital program as far as roadways and other things like that, highlight a few projects, and then talk about the worksheets themselves too as well. So let's start with the first slide here. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll take my glasses here. As we look into the budget, the first draft worksheet that you'll see says P1. This is actually the sheet that we'll finish with related to the water and sewer discussion, and it shows the balance of expansion revenues, water sewer expansion revenues that are itemized that you'll see on this sheet, Also, it shows the expenses at the end too as well. And we'll talk about this first sheet last. It's a little backwards, but this is a good summary of what's going on within the water and sewer side. The next several pages are related to operations, and if we can skip right to page number 7, and we can always go back and talk about any of the other line items that the board would like to discuss as well. But if we could start with page number 7 and talk about capital, under capital/utility expansion, you'll see where it says on page 7, it says Division 91 capital, and above that it says utility expansion, and there are several numbers over in the right-hand column. And the reason why we have this slide here, this first slide here of the water tower, this is actually water tower number 2, as well as the ground storage tank and lake water station, pumping station along 127th Street, is that we did include some funds within the budget based on some of the things that we're seeing in the system. The village currently has 5 water towers in the system, and they were built all at different times in the history of the community. In 1954, the tower that's over by the Pima building, it's a 200,000 gallon tower that was constructed, and it's been painted and repainted several times over the past 60, 70 years or so. This tower that you see is tower number 2. It's a 750,000 gallon tower. It's located near Coil Plus Drive. It was built in 1963, and it's been painted and repainted several times in the past too as well. Well, time seems to go by quickly, which is true. This tower was painted approximately 15 years ago, and as part of the Route 30 water main installation project, we had the opportunity to not only drain the tower, but to have a firm come in and clean the interior of the tower and then do an engineering inspection. Now, we do regular structural inspections of the water towers to make sure that their structural integrity is there, and we can display that to our insurance company and to the EPA too as well. But this was a more extensive cleaning and inspection with the tower. And when they looked at it and we got the reports and talked about it too as well, the tower's in good condition. I don't want anyone to get too concerned. But there are signs related to the paint and the primer that the tower should be programmed to be repainted within the next 5 years or so. And this kind of prompted a discussion with Superintendent Stofko and the rest of the employees about the other towers and the time frame and the things that have gone on. And we feel it's best this fall to get a contractor, drain the towers, including the ground storage facilities been in service for 10 years. Give it a cleaning, give it a good inspection, make any corrective items that need to be repaired at this point, and then come up with a 5- and 10-year plan for recoating and maintenance and things of that nature related to the system. And we think it's a prudent time to do that too as well. So there's been some funding included in there. You'll see contractual services is higher than it was in the past. And this is to take into account really to do a good evaluation of the larger structures and equipment that we have, and kind of get a plan for the next 5 years and the next 10 years too as well. You can see if we step back on this column where we have the 2007, there were a couple items that we did put on hold, and that was based on the fact that we really needed to complete the replacement of the VFD units at the Lake Michigan Water Station, which we bid and the board has awarded, and the contractor is online working on that too as well. But that was a $300,000 expenditure, and in an effort to avoid throwing the budget off this year, we did defer or delay the purchase of a crane truck, a pickup truck, and maintenance at one of the lift stations that we believed could wait another year. So you'll see that those numbers have been moved over into the new column too as well for the coming year. So in essence, under the list that you have on the right-hand side for capital improvements are the cleaning and the inspection of the water storage facilities, an evaluation of the entire system to kind of program in the next 5 to 10 years as far as maintenance is concerned, some money and vehicles to get that crane truck that's needed to lift the larger wastewater treatment plant pumps that we have, and then some lift station maintenance too as well, and to finish up the Route 30 water main project. So that in essence is sheet P7 that we have, and it's capital related to water and sewer. If we go to the next slide and just spend a little bit of time on this too as well, and then we'll answer questions and things like that, because it's good to take a break in between the water and into the Capitol. You'll find that the next 3 sheets that the village board has, and I believe they're available online too as well, is a pretty extensive list of the items, an engineering estimate of the items that would need to take place within this area that's generally south of Lockport Street, east of James Street, west of Route 59, and north of Commercial, but it would include Commercial as well. And this would be a complete reconstruction as far as the replacement of all the water, sewer, and storm sewer utilities, an upgrade in street lighting in that area, and then replacement of all the sidewalks, curb, gutter, the storm sewer, of course, and the roadway too as well. In essence, when you break down the entire list, and I know this was requested by the board, the total cost estimate is approximately $6.5 million to do that entire segment, all those components. Now, I can tell you a few things out of here without getting too far into the detail. We did estimate a replacement of the sanitary sewer mains, when in actuality we believe that after inspecting the lines and videotaping the lines, that there are sections that could be lined with a liner instead of replaced, and it's the same integrity as a new piece of pipe, but is actually about half the cost. There may be a savings of $300,000, $500,000 in that range if that could occur, but there's some additional surveying work and inspection that needs to take place before that happens. I think the other question that the village board had related to this was related to lead service lines, and that this is already a concern with the EPA. There's already some new regulation that was just recently passed down in Springfield. Probably be new regulation passed in Washington, D.C. too as well. And what we foresee is a requirement to phase in the replacement of all of our lead service lines over a period of time. So, in essence, the question was, how many lead service lines do we have in that area? And the answer is not as easy as it sounds. We estimate that there are somewhere between 97 and 126 lead service lines. And so the question for the board and the public is, well, why is it between 97 and 126? And the answer is over the years, if you think back to in 2000, we replaced the Desplaines Street water main. At that time, we replaced all of the service lines with copper up to a certain extent. If the homeowner wanted a new copper service line all the way into their house and they wanted to pay their proportionate share, they could have that. If they didn't, the water service stopped at the shutoff box of the corporation box, and they were left with the lead service line in their house. We know, at least on Desplaines Street, they're all new copper services up to the sidewalk in essence, but we don't know if they're lead services into the house or not. And so what it's actually going to take to get a more complete answer related to that is an inspection inside of every single one of the homes to do that. And we believe that that's best done as part of the design of the system. And in essence, that you have a pay item for the contractor to state that it's based on the number of services that are replaced, and they only get paid for the number of services that are replaced. So in essence, it's 100. It's not a huge number, but we did want to try and answer that question as best possible, and hopefully we did justice to it. In essence, this year, what we budgeted is money for engineering, for actual survey work out there for the inspection and televising of the sanitary sewer lines, to get a really good game plan, a good cost estimate, and then hopefully, if the board wishes to move forward with this project, that in 2018 we would complete the installation of the new utilities. That would be all new water sewer, storm sewer, and service lines, replace all the lead service lines, and then in 2019 we would complete the roadway work, street lighting, and the sidewalks too as well. So with that, I'm going to pause and answer any questions that you may have, or take direction in that matter too as well.
Alan, I know you did a little bit of homework with regard to those approximate 100 lead service lines. The total cost, not just from the Buffalo box into the house, but from the water main all the way into the house was about $400,000. Is that correct?
Yes, it's in that estimate, and we estimate the homeowner side because it is easier. You're not dealing with the sidewalk or the roadway to get from the Buffalo box to the homeowner side. It's approximately $1,000 in that range when we're at this magnitude. So it does kind of go hand in hand with when we talk about the capital and one of the other projects that we're going to delay for a little bit if that's the board's direction. But that's correct.
Alan, I got a question regarding the water. I actually live in the area you're talking about, and my house did have a lead service, both the service coming in and from the main to the B box and into the house. I just wanted to be clear, when and if you're going through and replacing these services, you're just doing it up to the Buffalo box. You're not going to require the homeowner to replace the service from the B box into the house. That will be their choice.
That's a great question, and the board did talk about this at one of the previous meetings too as well, and the concurrence was that the village's commitment would be to replace the service line all the way into the home. And that's what's anticipated within the budget and in the future budget. We understand that really traditionally it's been the homeowner's responsibility from the Buffalo box into the house, but we believe that the future legislation will require the installation of the copper line all the way into the house. The second part of that is that the way that the Illinois EPA has interpreted the new rules is a little different from what we had anticipated, and that there's a neighboring community made application for a similar job like this where they were just going to replace the service lines up to the Buffalo boxes. And the EPA's response was that that's fine, they'll approve the permit, but you will have to notify all the homeowners of the dangers in lead in drinking water. You'll have to complete an extensive testing program for lead within that area, and that if any of the lead samples exceed the current limit that you have, it'll be calculated into the entire town's compliance. So the response from one of our neighboring communities is, okay, we want to change our plan. We're going to bring the new copper lines all the way into the homes. And so it's the trend. And again, if this moves forward, we're going to disrupt this entire area for approximately 2 years. To provide the service line into the home is a minor amount in the big picture, and I just think that it's the right thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. Mine is not lead anymore. I had it replaced, but I know a lot of the people around me do. And is there, at a federal level, is there an opportunity for federal funds, do you think, to recoup some of this cost?
You know, it's hard to say. There hasn't been in the past. The way that the federal government and the state government have addressed water and sewer improvements is that their position has been that you have the opportunity to generate revenue through rates, so that the best that we can do for you is to offer a low-interest loan program. So we did take advantage of one of the low-interest loan programs, and we completed a $2.5 million project, and the interest is 1.25%. So you really can't beat that. Over 20 years it's fixed, it never changes. So you really can't beat that as far as that's concerned. With all the activities and things going on in Washington and the concerns for Flint, there's a chance. I mean, there's an outside chance. Because in some way, you know, Flint will be helped through some federal grant. We all believe that.
Right.
But is it fair to the rest of the country to bail out one community and not provide some benefit to other communities too as well? I don't know. They really haven't worked that out in Washington yet.
Okay.
So the answer is maybe. How's that? But probably not, but maybe.
Could hope.
How's that?
And then my other question regarding that was, for the I'll call them improvements, basically replacing, I assume we're just bringing things up to standard, like walks to be ADA compliant.
Yes.
I know the walks in that area aren't a standard width right now. Some are only 3 feet wide, and that's not the village standard. So everything's basically going to be brought up to a village standard. Is there anything over and above in here that's that I don't see, like someone was talking about parking at one time, additional parking spaces or something that is not there now that's being taken into account in this budget.
As part of the design, so to answer your first question, yes, everything will brought up to the ADA standards. Of course, you're well aware, the road's been resurfaced so many times, the curbing is almost non-existent in a lot of the areas, so of course new curb and gutter too as well. But with that, through the design, we would come back to the board. I'm sure it's several committees of the whole. We'd like to have a public outreach meeting too, or a couple of meetings too as well, to talk about parking and in what areas, and to talk about street widths and different things like that. So we're not looking for a radical change. We understand that this is a very, this is a key part, this is the core of the community. This is where the community started. But we would like to talk to the board and to the residents out there about some improvements that could occur. And parking is great. Parking and street lighting are two great examples of ways we could improve that area.
Right, because the time to do it would be now when you have everything tore up. So.
Yep. I guess my thoughts are, I don't know if our last meeting, if we actually decided that service all the way to the house was the best course. So at what point, I guess, does our ownership of that line end?
Traditionally, it's the homeowner's responsibility from the Buffalo box into the house. And of course, the board can set whatever policy that the board wants to set. The reason why we bring it up is that we believe that the EPA is going to be the driving factor in saying, yes, you're going to do this all the way into the house, but it's your prerogative as to how that you want to either recover your cost or provide this service as part of the disruption of the community for 2 years.
So even though, assuming, and again, it's future legislation, I think is what you indicated, right? So we don't know yet, but assuming if that was to go forward, we could still ask the homeowners to pay for that cost. If the government's going to make us do it for them, we could certainly pass that on, because typically it's not our expense, correct?
You could do that. If there was a grant component, that may change that a little bit, but yes, you could do that.
So my concern, I guess, is just being consistent with what we do with other neighborhoods. So I don't know that if somebody's water service line goes out, that we go out and we replace it. Now, I understand you're mentioning lead, but I also believe that at the time last meeting, we are not out of compliance with any levels of lead in our system today. So it's really not a safety issue today, correct?
We have not had any exceedance of the lead level. The Chicago lake water is not aggressive, unlike the conversion over in Flint. And then we do have a coating inside the pipes too, as well, with a polyphosphate. But just common sense, if we're cutting the lead, or the plumber is cutting the lead, there's always a chance that you could temporarily increase those lead levels. And I think, there isn't any federal legislation, but the way that the EPA is interpreting the new state legislation, it's going to be difficult we're just trying to be brutally honest with the board, it's going to be difficult to leave those lead service lines in and still. But again, back to your original question, is the cost the villages or the homeowners? That's really a board decision. It really is.
And you also mentioned, I guess, that they're going to look for testing or something with the neighboring application. But so we can run copper up to the house, but they might have lead pipes in the house.
Yeah.
We can't do anything about that, correct?
Well, the replacement of the copper service line all the way to the house and all the way to the water meter relieves the village of that responsibility for the extra testing. That ultimately, you are correct, for the lead service or the lead fixtures within the house, that won't affect us, and it won't change that part of it. But it will change if you run the copper line all the way into the house, the EPA is not going to require you to do the additional testing.
Let me ask this question. So if we decide, or if we look forward to at it and we think it needs to be done, and there's some homeowners maybe that don't want to, if we assume we should pass the cost on as we've done in the past, to be consistent, is there an alternative? In other words, could a homeowner get some kind of a filter that would, if there is, knowing that they already have maybe lead piping in their system, whether we change that line or not, would a type of house filter eliminate that safety issue for them inside?
You know, it could help, but I mean, this is something that, we're actually gonna meet with, Mr. Stofko and I are gonna meet with the EPA next month, and talk about what they believe the future is as far as lead service line regulation and where it's at, and we'll have a better handle on it at that point. So that's the best answer that I could give you related to that. But yes, there are filters that can remove things, but, we think the trend is to totally remove the lead service lines completely.
And what would the cost be per homeowner roughly to do that?
We're approximately $1,000 a house for their portion of the.
Now, are you proposing that we do their sewer line for them as well at the same time?
You know, this would be the best time to address the sewer lines, and that could be at the edge of the right-of-way, again, where the Buffalo box stops, and it could be the homeowner's responsibility from that part too as well. One of the challenges, depending on the area, if you have a lot of groundwater in the area, you'll get infiltration, and there'll be extra groundwater that'll enter the system and inundate the wastewater treatment facility. So there are some benefits to replacing the sanitary sewer line. But again, that can be a board decision as far as, and there's no EPA requirement. You can replace, we would recommend that you replace a service line at least up to and past the sidewalk. So in the future, if the homeowner has a problem, they're not tearing up the road, they're not tearing up the sidewalk. So that's what this estimate includes.
Is up to where?
Is up to the sidewalk with the sanitary sewer.
Well, from my perspective, I think it's important that we take advantage of the economy of scale. If you're going to do it, you're going to disrupt the roads and digging ditches, you might as well do all of it at one time. That's a lot more efficient. The people who come in to do the work will work right through. I am very reluctant to put the village in a position of trying to bill every homeowner for something they may or may not want, even though they should want it. They may not, and it makes it very difficult. And that's extra work for the village, and I don't know how much money it costs us to harass them to get it done, but it's better to assume the responsibility, I think, and take advantage of the economies of scale and move ahead. It's an important part of town. It's been here for a long time. The things are there. They need to be better. Now, how easy is it to tell that you have lead water pipes?
Yeah, it's very easy to tell once the water operators are inside the home, because the lead service line enters usually the basement or through the wall or through the crawl space, and then it's extended all the way to the water meter itself. So
A visual inspection inside the house.
It's a visual inspection.
Tell a pipe is what it is, okay.
Exactly, and then as part of the unit price I'd mentioned before, since the water and the sewer are generally in the same location, we would have the contractor at the time when they're replacing the sewer verify that that is a new copper line that was installed, either if it's part of Des Plaines Street or Chicago Street. We did a similar thing with the water main replacement to verify that, you know, just in good conscience, that it's not lead. Because there is there's an outside chance that someone did run a new copper line from the Buffalo box into their house and it's led out to the water main. We don't know any of those situations, but we'd feel to verify that too as well.
I agree with Trustee Lamb. I think that the economy of scale is a good thing. We should modernize the downtown, and we already provide the tree service when the trees were killed by the ash borer beetle. We took that upon ourselves to fix the problem. I believe this is a problem. It could affect the whole village as a whole. If you say what the EPA does is true, and if we don't fix from the line to the street to the house, and then that bangs the village on the lead content for the entire village, we don't know what Washington's going to do. I'm not really willing to take that chance for a small $800 to $900 per house fix. And that way we'll know it'd be safe, the residents will be safe, the people they sell their houses to will be safe, and everybody will be happy for a relatively small amount of money. I agree with Trustee Lamb, we should fix the problem.
All right.
And I'll just ask for clarity, sorry.
Sure.
We started this conversation, you had asked how much it was gonna be to do the services, wasn't that one of the questions, and what was the answer?
Approximately
total cost.
$1,000 for the homeowner side. The total is about $3,500 on average as an estimate for the entire service line from the water main all the way into the house. But since the area that's under the street, sidewalk, is more labor intensive, it's typically, that's where the bulk of the cost is at. So we're estimating about $1,000 into the house.
Okay. So we can still take advantage of economies of scale and just have the homeowners pay for it, and we could break that down over a number of times with the low interest loan, correct?
It's totally at the board's.
I think the problem you
prerogative.
run into with that then is you'll have a homeowner saying, no, I'm not going to do it. Then you have an ad hoc basis. Homeowner A has it done, homeowner B has it done, homeowner C and D don't have it done, thereby reducing the values of the homes in the neighborhood, because who wants to buy a house with lead pipes? Or even lead feeders to the house? Certainly not me, or anybody that I know, especially in today's climate. So I think we should just get it done.
And, you know, I'm glad, and I know we're not asking for a vote or a final decision, and we really don't need to at this point too as well. But I think it's good to start that discussion. And I think, you know, this is one of those projects, magnitude of scale wise, we're going to need to do a lot, and we will. We'll do a lot of public outreach and have meetings and things like that, because people are going to be very interested in what the plan is for the future and how the look and feel is going to occur once this is completed. But we're excited about the project. This, of course, will not be the last discussion related to this tonight, and with the adoption of the budget, we're just seeking concurrence to move forward with the engineering portion of it. We will bring an engineering contract back in the future, and then we'll have regular design meetings with the board and the updates too as well related to that. So,
Can I go back to the first topic, the water tanks?
sure.
We're painting the outside. Are we painting the inside? What's on the inside of these tanks?
Yeah, typically both, and it's the same paint system. What's interesting is that the paint system that was used on the 750,000 gallon tower, the one that we see there, is estimated to at its life to be a 20-year life cycle, which 5 years from now would put it at 20 years. The tower at 119th Street and Van Dyke Road, which is a 1 million gallon tower, has a Tnemec system that is actually supposed to be a 30-year. It's a guaranteed 30-year system. So, you know, it was built in 2000, so we're going on 17 years. You know, I'd really like to do an extensive investigation and see if it's lasting the test of time, and then bring the painter back, the original contractor still around, to take a look at it and make sure that we get that warranty too as well. So you've got a couple of different things. I don't want to make the board too concerned, because, you know, you think about it, we've got a tower that was built in the 50s, a tower that was built in the 60s, a tower that was built in 2000, and then 2005 and 6 we built 2 other towers. So it almost leads into the roadway discussion. There wasn't a whole lot that happened up until, you know, 1980, 90 something, and then things just took off like crazy. And so did the installation and construction of the facilities out there too as well.
Well, I certainly applaud the idea of checking it out and so on, but I'm trying to understand, you're painting only the exterior?
Yeah, in a painting project, we'd be doing the interior and the exterior.
Okay, what paint is on the interior? Because this is contacting the water that everybody drinks, so
Yeah,
what's the
it's,
surface there?
yeah, it's a new standard, and in fact, you know, one of the advantages is that we're going way back into history with the tower that was built in the 50s. There was a lead. This is all about lead tonight. It was a lead-based primer, and the lead-based primers, we're all familiar with that from the years ago. Were probably some of the best primers out there, but they had lead in them. So back approximately 16 years ago, when Tower 1 was repainted, that was completely blasted down to bare steel. And the new primer, and it's a Tnemec product too as well, was installed, and then the paint was installed in several different layers too as well. So that meets all the compliance. It's all, you know, acceptable for food grade and things like that. And in essence, the paint on the inside of the tower is the same on the paint on the outside of the tower. The outside just receives a special coat that is UV resistant. So in essence, it's the same product, and it seems to weather a little bit faster on the inside of the tower than it does on the outside of the tower. Hopefully
But it's more than a cosmetic thing, though.
it is.
Doing the inside, so, okay.
It is.
That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. Sure.
I'm sorry, I had a couple more questions, sorry, Alan, just for clarity. So you had mentioned earlier about those 3 items, the crane truck, the pickup truck, and a lift station work that was being delayed. Now, is that in this budget for next year, or is being delayed out of next year's budget?
It is in this budget for next year, and it does fit in the budget as far as, you know, balancing the budget. We're not looking for additional revenues, you know, coming up, so that we were able to include those items that were delayed from last year in the coming year's budget and still balance the budget.
Okay, so was the original discussion about delaying those next year?
No, we delayed them in this current fiscal year so that we could complete the work on the
The VFDs.
VFDs.
Thank you. And then just on the front page, it talks about, under the bottom section there, it talks about $250,000 other. Do you know what that would be for? It's an other
page?
category, P1.
Oh, P1.
About
And in
halfway.
fact, Jonathan, why don't you advance the slide, third slide, next slide, here we go.
Just says other 250,000.
That's,
Go ahead.
that's the administrative service charge. That 250,000 is charged back or brought back to corporate fund for services provided from staff, and that we aren't charging directly to the water and sewer fund. So anything, Brian's time, my time, payroll processing, accounting processing through my staff, anyone that isn't directly charged to this fund, that's the service charge that goes back to the corporate fund.
So there would be two of the 125,000 administrative. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And if I could, I can summarize a little bit on the budget side. I mean, this, just to refresh some of the board's memory and the public, this was brought to the board back in October 24th, so it's been a while since we've seen this, but it really hasn't changed much. If the board recalls, in essence, everything you're seeing is the same but for the capital, which was actually at 0 the last time you saw the budget. Some of the revenues were tweaked a little bit, really under 100,000, just to true up current revenues that we're seeing as far as this current fiscal year to make it a little bit more accurate. Other than that, it really was just the expenditures of capital on page 7. Everything else is relatively the same. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on the budget, but again, really, we haven't really touched anything but for the capital pieces within this budget. But it's all here, and I'd be happy. It's about a 3% difference from last year. The current proposed adopted budget that we have, just under $520,000 difference.
Okay, if there aren't any other comments, and again, the budget in its entirety and its draft form will be provided to the board, and we will have a public hearing too as well here in the near future, and we'll be happy to take any other comments and in any of the other sections, all the sections throughout the budget too as well. So if we can transition on to capital. Capital is on page, well, again, it's P1, but it's later on after the worksheet that you have there too as well. There's a summary page that we'll finish with too, just similar to what we had done with the water and sewer side of it too. And that's on P1. But if you move through on to P4, and let's step back to P3, has most of the changes and activities on this, and we'll go through a few of them. Let me touch on the projects, and then I'm going to try and bring this page together too as well. We did discuss with the board at a public meeting, committee of the whole meeting on December 12th, the capital budget. That was the first draft. There were some refinements and updates, and the board again discussed the capital budget on the 30th of January 2017. And the direction was to bring the near final numbers back to the board for discussion, and that's what we're here for tonight. I'm going to hit on just a few of the construction projects that we have going on in the coming year if the budget's approved, and talk a little bit about how some of the numbers had changed. This is 127th Street. It is a good example of a positive way and kind of a restructuring of how the state is approaching this project. But as the board is well aware, 127th Street is under construction. The contractor's currently under winter break, but after the winter break in the spring, they'll come out, complete the storm sewer work, There's a box culvert that needs to be installed, basically a bridge that needs to be installed over the creek. There are pathway, sidewalk, street light improvements, grading improvements. There's a deep ditch out there, and of course, new curb and gutter, roadway, turn lanes, things like that. The engineer's estimate on this project was about $3.9 million. The low bid came in at $2.7 million. The village was successful in achieving a $2 million grant for this project. In the past, and it's an STP, this is a federal grant. In the past, the village would administer the project, pay the contractor, then the state would reimburse the village the funds that were due related to the grant. And sometimes that would take a little time. The state has taken a different position on this project, which we are fine with. They are actually going to pay the contractor. We are actually we're inspecting the work. We're reviewing all the pay estimates. We're sending our notes along with all the information to the state. The state will then process that payment and pay the contractor. The state will retain the grant and apply it to this project, and then they will bill us for our proportionate share related to the project. So you'll see in the middle of the page where it's highlighted in yellow, we have an expenditure from last year that was at $1.8 million for 127th Street, and it's actually been reduced to $680,000. Now the reason why it was reduced is this is the village's proportionate share. So the good news is we went from $1.8 million down to $680,000, which is good, and it's a good project no matter what. But by the same token, on the revenues, that grant revenue had to be removed because the state is taking the position of receiving the grant and then distributing that back to the contractor and billing the village. So without making it too complex, I think I tried to wrap that one up properly, but our obligation is only $650,000. But on the other side, to be truthful, we can't claim that $2 million grant in our budget on our books today. So in essence, it's the same thing, but it did reduce the amount on that particular project.
We're going to have you write that section for the CAFR next year, Alan, because you did a wonderful job.
Yeah, it's clear as mud on that one, but it'll all work out in the end. It's just a little change. So Jonathan, if you want to move to the next one. The Pace Park and Ride is actually, I believe, on this page. Randy, let's see. Page 4. 3? Oh, no, bottom of page 3. Gotcha. Okay, it's on the bottom of page 3. It's not highlighted in yellow. That's why it didn't jump out at me. I apologize. This is a $5 million project. It's a 400 space lot with lighting, parking lot lighting. Accessibility is with a concrete drive for the buses, a new traffic signal at Van Dyke Road too as well. The board is well aware of this project and did approve the intergovernmental agreement for the public's benefit. PACE also approved the intergovernmental agreement. They are paying 100% of the cost for this project, so we're very pleased. We always like projects where other people pay 100% of the cost. So that's good. And then also we did have a meeting with the PACE staff, which went very, very well. They outnumbered us. We brought a lot of people from the village, but I think they had about 15 people there from PACE, and they were so excited about this project that we were just pleased to see the enthusiasm and the cooperation between PACE. That being said, there's quite a bit of engineering work that still needs to take place. We will need to submit, as per the IGA, regular updates as far as the engineering is concerned. They'll have to review that, respond to us too as well. This is a partnership, so it takes a little longer to get all the pieces approved, and the hope is to have a groundbreaking this year and completion early next year. It could potentially move up, but we're not making any promises at this point, but we'll work at this as quickly as we can, and we know that the people on the PACE side are very committed to this project and very excited about this project too as well. So that's within the budget. There is a balancing revenue related to this as far as money coming in from PACE at the $5.8 million to offset this cost too as well. So if we go to the next slide, Des Plaines Street parking lot, this is actually within the TIF and not within the capital, but we wanted to bring it up as far as an improvement downtown, and we knew that the Village Green discussion would probably lead to a parking discussion at some point. We are currently working on the engineering out of miscellaneous engineering this year on expanding the parking lot on North Des Plaines Street. It'll add an approximate 30 spaces, 32 spaces in that area. And then there's some other expansion opportunities down there with the conversion of the old fire station and also the work at the trolley barn. We just see the need for additional parking. And your study that we had completed with Baxter and Woodman indicated that additional parking is needed at certain times. So we believe this will be beneficial. And if approved through the budget, we will bring this forward as well as far as construction this summer too as well. The next project
Can I ask a question on that one?
Sure.
So am I looking at that right? Is there going to be actually an access point off of Main Street for that?
We would actually have to get an IDOT permit for that, so the first phase of the construction would only include access off of Des Plaines Street, and then we would work it with IDOT. That it could take an additional year to get the access off.
But that's
of
the
Route
plan.
126. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. In essence, before I transition to the pavement condition report, that is the bulk of the changes in the capital. You do have all the sheets for the projects that we had talked about before. They've been updated, a little status as to who the engineer is, who the contractor is, what the estimated costs were, the grants that are involved too as well in each one of the sheets. I know that was requested by the board. We'd be happy to answer any questions related to these projects, but of course these projects, and I know I didn't do a slide for the 143rd Street extension. We're very committed to that project. We've made an application for the next round through Fast Lane. There will be another application round for Tiger here in the near future. We anticipate some grant funding from that in the future, and we're very committed to that project too as well. So with that, there's several others in here that are ongoing projects. We'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback from the board related to the capital side.
Alan, I had a question for you. On the, I see they zeroed out the James Street lighting. Where did that money, did it get reallocated or did it just go back to the general?
Yeah, I'll let Tracy answer that question. Yeah.
Okay, well, if the board recalls, we had a little bit of a challenge with our budget the last time we presented the capital, and there was some conversations relating to James Street, which was originally budgeted at $250,000. Staff took some time and determined that it wasn't a project that is going to be moving forward anytime soon, and those funds were just reallocated within the capital fund. We really didn't have, at the time that we saw it the last time we presented this, there were some areas that needed to be adjusted as far as revenue and expenditures, and so it's not like it disappeared.
So it was just spread throughout?
Well, and the changes that you see are the changes that were made. So that one was zeroed out. As you can see, the Village Green project was reduced as well, and that's because of the timing of that project and when it will move forward. That's engineering, basically some engineering work based on that project that's going to be split between water and sewer and capital. And then the 127th Street was trued up for the village's cost, and we took the grant out, and that's the bulk of where that expense is sitting now. So between those three line items is where the net became to a balanced budget for this year.
'Cause I know we had talked about a possible a rebate program or to take the less than desirable projects because of our water main problem or our lead problem and to put it into one separate line item where we would then vote on yay or nay to use those funds or to possibly rebate them throughout the community. And I don't know anybody else's feelings, but that's something I'm for. I don't know that we can do that on the short amount of time we have with this budget year, but I think it would be advantageous to the board and the community to develop a program like that for next year's budget and to think ahead, because I know once this gets passed, we're going to have to start working on the next one. And that's generally how things go. And I would like a separate line item for these projects that we could either say yay or nay midway through the year, have a pool of money sitting there that we can, if we don't use it or we don't feel the projects are viable at that time because of circumstance change, that we can rebate the money, the extra funds to the residents.
Yeah, I think the plan, at least from Administrator Murphy's perspective and staff, is sometime within the summer, late spring, summer, to talk through some of the challenges that we face, specifically within the capital fund, but globally, if there's any other issues that come up. Water and sewer was one that we talked about tonight. We are still only funding, $2 million towards our maintenance of our roads within the budget that we've been presenting. $1 million out of here and $1 million out of MFT. That won't be enough in the future. We have to figure out a funding mechanism for that, or how that gets allocated going forward. So I don't want to overspeak with what Mr. Murphy might say, but that's kind of where we plan to go in the summertime.
To that end, exactly, we had hoped that by not doing the James Street work, that there would be additional funds that could go into taking care of the road network, just paving the existing streets, following the report on the IMS data that came out back in January. As you recall that report, and Alan will probably speak a little bit more to it, but generally speaking, we've made a lot of gains over the last 5 years toward what we were doing toward our resurfacing projects. We were at that point 5 years ago putting only $750,000 into street resurfacing, so it's rather impressive that the board was able to get us to having a $2 million program. But as you saw with the IMS data, that we're still short in that regard. So to the point that you're getting at, exactly right, Trustee Wojciechowski, is we want to start having a conversation early on this summer, as early as June, so that we can, after the election, and we know who the newly elected folks are, that we can start having a conversation as to how do we establish what those priorities are, what are our funding options on going forward with this, what are the choices that we have to make. And, to the point that you're getting at is we want to get started a lot earlier this year with that.
I guess I got to bring it up because I know I talked about it before. We talked about it early, about the assessed value and what we're going to go in for, and then the comment was made, I believe by you, Ms. Murphy, that we could adjust that as we went forward in this process. So now you're saying that no, that's not an option, it sounds like.
Well, no, I'm speaking of what next year is looking for. That's the point that I'm getting at for the conversation that needs to start taking place. I think you have some very large challenges that are ahead of you. You know, and again, I'm going to steal Alan's thunder here, but largely speaking, in order to maintain the street network at its current status, we need to bring in about another $2 million a year. This isn't, which is a very large number. It's a very big thing for us to try to tackle. That's a lot of heavy lifting for us as staff and the board to take on, and it's not something that we can pick up and have a conversation starting after we complete our audit report, which is typically when we kick off our budget presentation conversations. This is something that we will want to start tackling in earnest after the election. That's our recommendation, and would like to start those conversations, like I said, as early as June.
So I guess part of that, and maybe I should know this, but so you talk about, I think it was $6 million for the Village Green stuff. I mean, where, do you have an estimate where that money's coming from?
Well, exactly. That's another one of those very challenging things that we do face. If you take a look back at the sheets that, you know, I always sound doom and gloom, but I have to tell you that where we are. When you take a look at where you stand on the revenue and expenses for the Water and Sewer Fund, our depreciation cost for 2016 was $3.1 million, and it was for 15 and 14 as well. We don't cover the entire cost of depreciation. We cover, well, we fall about $2 million short of that. So we're covering about $1 million of our total depreciation cost on that. As well, we divert sales tax revenues from the Water and Sewer Fund that should be going into our capital fund into Water and Sewer to supplement the cost for those fees to our residents to the tune of about $1.7 million. So we have a lot of money that's being diverted into the Water and Sewer Fund, largely to keep the water and sewer rates, you know, at a place where our residents are okay with what they are. However, we're diverting those funds out of places where where should be putting them. Likewise, when you get into the question of how do we pay for the capital needs, just maintaining what we do have. We did raise the sales tax and gasoline tax over a few years ago with the idea of supplementing funds to take care of our road network. That's where largely a lot of the additional funds came from to get us to that $2 million number. So we're really looking at trying to explore what are those revenue options, what are those projects that mean something to you, what are those areas where we don't go forward. To the point, Trustee O'Rourke, that you raised actually last summer, was it really comes down to money. We need a lot of money, and that's exactly right. So we want to have that conversation with you early and often so that we can really move this where I know you had expressed some interest before, and Trustee Wojciechowski, what you're mentioning tonight too, and all the trustees have mentioned, that this is a very important and dear subject for us to take on.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where you were going with trying to rank some of these things. So if there's not enough money, what are the options? So can we, but once we start some of these, we're already committed. That's, I think, where maybe you were going with it.
Well, that's
right.
why I wanted to put, instead of when we do the budget process and we have, 15 pages of different line items, I'd rather put it into one pool or one line item with a large number where you can have a wish list, as the department heads can have a wish list, and they can come before it, and if anything pops up, the money's there. And we can say, well, you know what, the trees maybe this year, well, we won't be able to spend 200,000, maybe only 100,000 this year. We can take that 100 and move it much easier. And if there is a surplus at the end, if we do decide to change any tax rates or anything like that, we can then, what Administrator Murphy had said a couple meetings ago, something like New Lenox does, is rebate some of that money to the taxpayers if we have extra. But it just sets it up much easier than all these different line items with all these different projects, and then we throughout the year it'll say, well, we passed the budget's been passed, you've approved it already, in essence. I'd rather have it all come up at, individually for each project, and then if we have a problem like we have now with the road surface that we didn't know about 6 months ago because we just paid for the study, we'll have the allocated funds sitting there in a fund, and we can zero out some other project. Just more efficient, in my opinion.
I would agree. I think I'm not an accountant, so it gets confusing. And for me, I see some, like in the capital accounts, I see some stuff for vehicles, but then I see vehicles in other accounts as well. So you look through and you say, how much are we spending for vehicles? Well, on capital, it's one. On another budget, it's something different. So to try to figure out what that total is, you got to go through like each page, it seems like.
Right, and that's why I beat my drum.
Actually, if I can on that one, there's only two places we do vehicles. One is capital and the other is water and sewer. Those are the only two places.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just easier for us as the board members. That's every time we have a vehicle purchase, I'll bring it up, and I will throughout the next year. I'd like to see them all done at once. If the police department has their list of vehicles they need for the year, I'd like to see it done in, say, February or an arbitrary month, whatever it is. The chief can come forward, put his proposal forward, and we're going to say yes or no. Or maybe not 15, maybe 4, or maybe 9, or whatever the number is. But I'd like to do it all at once rather than 1 this month, 2, 3 months from now, 4 more 6 months from now. That's just the way I like to see things.
There's a bit of a challenge on doing that.
I understand.
Okay, so I don't have to repeat it. I understand where you're coming from. Administratively,
I know.
very.
Sorry, Ellen, I'd like to go back and ask a question on one of your slides there.
Sure.
And it's really, I think, more for Baxter and Woodman. I mean, I think it's regarding 127th Street. Obviously, it's great news that the proposal went down from 3.8 to 2.7, but did they ever give you any indication? I mean, that's a big gap where that difference was for $1.1 million on a $3.8 million project.
Yeah, highly competitive bid environment, so there were several bidders that bid on the project. And then the removal of the excess soils can be a very expensive part of the project, since, the board's well aware Deconstruction was a contractor. They have the ability, since they have so many jobs that are going on at the same time, to use their magnitudes of scale, disposing of material, moving equipment and things like that, to do the job much cheaper than the estimate. So that was in essence, it was the removal of the excess material we thought might be a problem, and Dee was able to give us a very good bid for that.
Thank you.
Well, if I can transition on just quickly, and we can come back to capital too as well, but just to follow up and kind of finish off the discussion, that's good, Jonathan, the pavement condition exhibit here too as well. And I know this is near impossible to read, but this was provided to the board. It's within the packet. It's online too as well for individuals that want to take a look at it. This was the data that was collected for this year, 2007. And it gives an indication of the approximate pavement conditions of various areas throughout the communities. Generally, they run pretty consistent throughout the subdivisions, because the subdivisions in many cases were built at about the same time, unless you get into some of the larger ones that were done in different phases and that were resurfaced in different phases too as well. Just to talk about the numbers a little bit overall, so that I think the public can get a better understanding of where we're at. In 2012, when we had completed the survey, the pavement condition was a 79, and 0 is the lowest you can go, and that's as bad as a roadway could get, and 100 is the best that a pavement condition could get. So just to get an idea as far as magnitude of scale. So in 2012, we were at 79. Throughout the past 5 years, the board has directed, and we believe that we were in pretty good shape, expending about $2 million a year for roadway resurfacing, and believe that we were probably still in that range. But in actuality, we did drop down in 2017 to an overall score of 77, which is only a couple of points lower. But at this rate, at the $2 million a year, we are trending on the negative side. Now, if we go to the next slide, which is the next to the last page that you have within the packet, Engineer Threewitt had gathered this information and provided this graph based on the information that was collected by IMS. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting documents that was created out of the study this far. And what makes it interesting is that you look at the span. If we continue to spend $2 million a year, or we move up to $4 million a year, or we don't do anything at all for the next 5 years. So this is 5 years out, what the community is going to look like as a whole. And if you look at the groupings, it looks like that things really aren't changing that much, aside from if you do nothing, you're really going to be over on the other side and you're going to be in terrible shape. But when you look at it more closely, if you stay at the $2 million funding level, 48% of the roadways in this community will be below 70, or in some cases, well below 70. And 70 is kind of that marker where below 70 we get more cracking, we start to get some potholes and things like that of that nature. And so at the $2 million funding, you've got just about half of the roadways in the community that are going to be below 70. And if you step that up to the $4 million a year, you're at about 30% of the roadways will be below 70. But there are more roadways that are over in the 100 to 90 and 80 to 89 and in that range too as well. And what I'm trying to kind of convey is that not only is it that reduction down to half of the roadways being below 70, but it kind of puts you behind the 8 ball after that too as well. As we start to project out even further, we kind of backed off on that because 10 years out is really hard to tell at this point. And we've had some suggestions. We're going to actually work on a couple of case studies for different areas to see how quickly the roads are degrading. Is it 12 years? Is it 15 years? Is it 20 years before resurfacing? And how do they score-wise degrade? And that'll give us a better idea too as well. But to continue on at the $2 million level, and we're not looking for any decisions or really necessarily any input tonight, 5 years from now is going to put us in a position where we had talked about, well, what is the alternative? If you get to that point, you almost have to get to the point where you invest 10 or 20 or $30 million back into the community in one given year just to catch up to where you should be. So I don't mean to be all gloom and doom. We can compare ourselves to our neighbors, and we're actually doing very well. I mean, I can name a number of streets in other communities that are not faring as well, and I think the crew is doing a great job at keeping it together. But if it's any indication from what's happened in the last 5 years and what we're projecting out to the next 5 years, our recommendation is to pay some more attention and in essence provide some additional funding for resurfacing in the future. So, but that's not for this year's budget. That's for a discussion of the new board in the near future, possibly a strategic plan discussion too as well, and that'll be for basically this time next year as part of the board discussion as far as funding is concerned. So I'll be happy to answer any questions related to this. Randy will answer all the difficult technical questions too as well, and we can always step back to capital if there's anything else that the board may have too.
So I'm sorry, Alan, so is your recommendation basically to stay at the $2 million mark then?
Well, the recommendation is that if we stay at the $2 million mark, we will continue to lose ground until half of the roadways are below, are not in terrible shape, but they're below what our normal standard would be, and it's only going to get worse from there. So staff's recommendation is for the new board to really seriously look at increasing the funding to somewhere around $4 million a year for roadway resurfacing to maintain that level. And even at that, and again, I don't want to be gloom and doom, at $4 million a year, 5 years from now, we're going to go from a 77 most likely to 75. So at 4 million, we're not even trending back up at that point. And we kind of stopped at that level. We said 5 million will probably keep you at a 77, but 5 million's even a bigger hurdle to achieve. And we believe 4 million's more realistic for the discussion here in the future.
But I think the question that you're asking, Trustee O'Rourke, is that the budget for this upcoming year proposes a $2 million resurfacing program.
That was part of it. The other part, what I heard was with that graph, it said that even, you know, depending on what we spend, if we stay at the 2, they all seem to be fairly well grouped for the next 5 years, even at the 2. But to your point, we're going to continue to lose more and more, so your recommendation is obviously spend more money to try to maintain what we have.
Yeah, I would encourage the board and the public to not get too focused on the middle of the road. I'm more concerned about the lower end. The top end, it's nice because at the 4 million, it puts more of the roadways up on the upper end, and they won't need attention for a while. But it's the lower end that I really get concerned about because it points to the next 5 years. Well, in 5 years, if you're going to be at, you wouldn't be at a 75, you'd be at a 70 or a 69 in 5 years if you stayed at the 2 million. What happens over the next 5 years? Does it, you know, it does drop off when you look at the graph, not like a cliff, but it does drop off significantly, and it's going to be very difficult to play catch up at that point.
We got some big decisions coming, don't we?
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, heavy lifting. I personally, as I said last time we talked about it, I'd like to see us go to 3 million. Your recommendation is not to stay at 2. The budget says maybe stay at 2, but that's not a recommendation from staff because you know we're going to deteriorate. It's going to penalize us down the road. Let me just step back a brief moment, at least from my perspective on the budget. The most important thing is revenue. If we track the revenue closely, we at least have a base to work with. The other part of the revenue, other part of the budget is the expenses. And if you're very careful how you expend your money, you end up with a little bit of extra money, which we have rolled over into the capital fund at the end of the year. You can't predict that. Our job right now is to come up with a balanced budget. But if we're very careful how we spend, we may end up with a little bit more money. And I'd like to see some of it go towards the roads sooner rather than later, because downstream we're going to have trouble. And the proposal that you know, Scott and you and Brian have talked about will give us a better analysis of how fast our roads are deteriorating and in what conditions. Ones that are heavily traveled, we've got 2 data points 5 years apart, and you got a lot of roads in there, so we can then start plotting this and come up with generalized curves that actually match our roads and our conditions and not just what IMS had. So I think the study you're going to maybe work on this summer will pay real big dividends and how quickly you may have to show up with more money. Your projection is, yeah, that we'll go down on average, but we may be able to fine tune that a little bit and either create a sense of urgency to find more money sooner or feel a little bit more comfortable about the money we are putting in. My guess is we'll want to put more in, but we got to find it. It's a lot of things we want to do, and revenue is key. We haven't raised anything in quite a while. The last things were the gas tax and the sales tax of 0.5%. That was, 5 years ago now? 4 or 5?
I want to say it was 4 years ago.
It's been a ways. So I just, little sampling of other people. Then Skokie, their sales tax is 12.25%. Shorewood's 8 3/4, and we're at 8.5. So this is a very small sample, but other people are running into revenue problems too, and they're finding ways to increase it. Hopefully, we can be smart about it, work our budget carefully. But the key is revenue. You know, if that revenue falls off from our expectations, we end up in bigger problems. It's nice if it goes higher. Sometimes it does. If you're conservative in forecasting, you have a chance to go higher. But it's a work in progress every year, though. You can say, okay, this is what it is right now, but as the year rolls out, you can say things are changing a little bit, and maybe we do have some more money, hopefully. We know we have some serious places to put it. At least I think we do. So.
I mean, and I would certainly agree. I think on the revenue side, I think, you know, the village and staff have been good stewards with the expenses. And I know the homeowners appreciate that. On the revenue side, I think my biggest concern or level of focus is really on how do we create new sources, not necessarily new taxes, but how do we get new retail development, how do we get new industrial development. And I think you watch what's going on with retail, and I think that window is closing because, you know, so many people are going online. So I think it goes back to the, you know, Route 30 TIF, you know, where are we at with that? I know we started that process, and I'm not asking for an update. I know that will be part and later, but I think more and more that becomes even more important, and the timing of those types of things, you know, public-private partnerships, you know, can we start looking at some of those ideas for, you know, if there's vacant dirt and we can give people incentives to come and, you know, maybe build a center or a big box. I think that's what our homeowners are looking for, not only to get the additional services, but also the help on the property taxes as well. So I think, you know, from my perspective, that window is closing. So I think the sooner we put focus on that, I think the better off, you know, we'll be for our residents.
I'd agree with Trustee O'Rourke, but I'd like to point out something in the revenues I think is really important and needs to be brought to even more attention. I'm very impressed by it is the grant line items, where in the past they were almost, they were nowhere near what you're proposing to get in 17-18, and I just want to say I know how hard it is to get grants, and the staff and everyone else, you guys should be commended for these numbers that are on here. It makes up a huge difference. This is low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. You know, it's easier to get than a big box store. So, in my opinion, more focus should be put towards getting grants, finding more grants in different sources, because that's where it's going to make up for some of those lack of revenues that we may or may not have by not taxing this or raising that. So great job there, and I think it's something that, you know, we should push more often, and maybe even look at getting an additional staff member just specifically to look at grants. I don't know if we do have that or if it's even possible. You're smiling at me like you're thinking about it already.
we do. It's Scott and Randy and Alan and John and everybody does. Is the difficulty with grants, and thanks for pointing that out. I do want to thank especially Randy and Scott for securing the grants that we did secure. And thankfully, it was largely due to a call for projects at a time that we had some projects ready to go forward, just not with any of the funds available. And some other communities haven't been able to come up with their local matches. So we were in a very good position to be able to go forward on those. Some others, though, are extremely competitive. These were also competitive. We were just in a very well-positioned place. Some of the other grants are much more competitive, as we found trying to receive funds for the 143rd Street extension. For example, it's a very competitive, very challenging process to go forward with. But one of the things, what's happened where I was going with this, Trustee Ryan, is that grant funds have become very specialized. So to have that traditional grant writer, like we've seen organizations do in the past, has largely fallen away. And largely because the specialties of how these grants come together, you almost need to be, if you're going after a law enforcement grant, for example, you have to be in law enforcement and have a very strong understanding in that particular area. Same thing with how we were able to respond as quickly as we did to get these two particular grants that are showing on the board for streets. You almost have to have a subject matter expertise in just that particular area. So you're right, we need to keep on top of those, absolutely. But to bring on a staff member that their sole purpose is to go chasing grants, those days they left at about the same time I left Washington, D.C. in the 80s. So
I agree with Trustee O'Rourke. Grants are great. They're usually year to year, but the residents I talk to want to see the economic development. They look at us, we go, and they see a lot of the retail stores that pop up in a community that's smaller than ours. And they ask, why not here? I ask the same thing. I think, Ed, you asked the same thing, too. I'd like us to focus more on economic development. That's a long-term strategy. If we were to redevelop the Route 30 corridor with some stable, good retailers, that's a long-term prospect for tax dollars, sales tax dollars, not just grants year to year.
You know, I want to comment on this for both the trustees. Obviously, everyone up here understands the need and want for economic development. We are working on, Route 30 and how to develop that better. But one of the challenges we have in this community that we've seen over and over is the limitations to the highway systems, and that does make a difference. I mean, we understand that residents want that. We know it. We're working towards it. But we're not in the same position as other communities around us that have that direct access to highways. And that is a serious limitation. That's why 143rd is so critical for us. Some of the other, accesses, if they ever figure out what they're doing with I-55 and something that's going to take 10 years, we're really limited. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying it's not going to happen or we can't make it happen. I just want to say for the record, I don't think there's anyone up here or there facing us right now that doesn't understand that need, and we are trying. And I want to make that statement very clear, because this is not a new concept to try to get the big box stores here, but to something that you've both mentioned before too. Bricks and mortar facilities are also doing different things too. They're not necessarily reaching out to build more that way in a lot of ways because of the online balance of purchasing. So I think it is important. I'd love to see big box stores. I'd love to be able to go 5 minutes away to find all the services. Love to be able to bring all that in and reduce our taxes. But that is something that I will say that in the time that I've been on this board has been in the forefront of everyone's ideas of what we can make happen, and we're working on it. But it's not a new concept, and it's not that we didn't know it was there. We know we need it. We agree with you, but it's going to take. Unfortunately, everything takes time, and that's the most frustrating thing of all. But I would say for economic development, between the task force that was in place, and now Jake working on things, and Jonathan's department, everybody here. I mean, we hear about things all the time, and to opportunities that are out there and follow up on them. So.
Yeah, the key is sustainability. I agree with Trustee Benucci about the transportation. That's why 143rd Street's got to be our #1 priority. We were going to do a study, but we said, well, let's wait to see if we can make 143rd Street happen, because that'll change the dynamic in the town a lot. So that's why we keep focusing on that. But the problem in new developments is sustainability. There's a lot of shopping centers now that have empty spaces. Dominic's on 95th Street's gone. That shopping center has been decimated. There's just very few people there. I went by another one in Bolingbrook just today. The Sporting Port Authority, whatever it was, is gone. They've got 2 or 3 empty storefronts there. So getting them in is important. Obviously, if you don't have them in, you can't make hay with them. But you have to sustain them, and that's getting to be a problem because, as Trustee O'Rourke said, there's more online stuff. It costs money to put inventory in a big box. And where it's all going to end up, I don't know, but it's a real challenge. But sustainability is a key factor, and we have to look at that part of it too. Investment is nice, but a lot of things going in the Oswego and so on, will they sustain themselves? I don't know. It's too early to tell. But
Well, the access road we do have, Route 30 and I-55, it's a prime example of an area that can be developed to much greater potential than it currently has.
oh, absolutely.
And since I've been here, not much has been done besides the roadway getting fixed that the average resident can see. I mean, most people aren't delving into our packets and our files. There's a few who do. But the average Jane and Joe citizen aren't delving into the packets. They just drive down the road and they drive down there and says, man, this hasn't changed in 2 years. Nice roadway, but the rest of it.
Well, that's
I mean,
yeah.
this is just
I'm
a
on the
perspective.
board. The boulevard's been number one or a high priority, which is the 30 and 55. It ran into a variety of problems. The economy turned down was one of the key things. There were legal problems with the developer who owned the property. A lot of those things have been resolved. They may be making progress again, but you know, again, there's been a tremendous amount of emphasis. If we could have moved that, we would have moved it. Since I've been on the board, there's just been no way. We're well aware of it. The other one we lost was the one on 119th Street. The boulevard's probably a closer term bet because of the access of 55 and improvements on 30. But 119th potentially is good, but the shopping center across the street was half empty for quite a long time. I think it's a little bit better than that right now, but there's still empty spaces. So economic investment is challenging.
Well, that was my point. I mean, we're not here to make them sustainable. I mean, we're hoping that residents are going to support them and the demand is there, but we can't run their businesses for them. My comment was just that if we think it's difficult today, wait 5 years, wait 10 years. It's going to be a lot more difficult. So if we want to try to get some results, I think the sooner the better. And I'm not saying we haven't been focused on it. I'm just, you know, I used Route 30. The TIF has been in process, but it's still not in place yet. And that's a great tool for attracting and being able to utilize resources to attract tenants. And that's a great corridor that could be redeveloped. That's the only reason I bring that up.
If I may address that just very briefly, I want to commend the village board for the leadership and the support relative to economic development to add our staff member that's been his sole focus now. So I have the full confidence that we're doing everything we can, and I know from conversations large and small to projects and opportunities large and small, we're working day in, day out. I hear the conversations. I'm part of some of the conversations, and I have full confidence that we're making headway. I think this discussion underscores the commitment and the strong feeling on the part of the board. We know your vision, and we're working to achieve that. So.
No, and I didn't mean to take away. I think you guys are doing a great job. All I'm saying is us as a board, we can be keeping that top of mind as well. I mean, I brought it up before about having agenda items. I can't get things on the agenda, but one of the things I think is important, we haven't never talked about since I've been is capital, is public-private, development. What does that look like? What should it look like? Can we do that? Is that a tool that we could use? Is it a useful tool? Is it too expensive? But not to have a conversation, I don't really know. That's where I was going.
Well, thank you, everybody, for the feedback tonight. It's very helpful, and we very much appreciate it. Mrs. Pleckham, next steps are?
March 13th, you will receive an overview of the overall budget. All the sheets that we've presented throughout the last few months will be consolidated and combined into one nice, neat little package for you. And at that point, we go into the public hearing process. The public hearing notice will be published the week of the 23rd. The public hearing will be set at this point for April 3rd, with possible adoption that night, depending on if there's any public comment or any concerns or questions that come up. But that is the time frame. So you will see these pages come once again in draft form, and then we will get working on the binders and having everything ready for the public hearing on the 3rd.
Reminders?
March 6th, the village board meeting, 7 p.m. March 7th, next plan commission meeting, again at 7 p.m. March 8th, coffee with the mayor at 9 a.m. March 9th, Historic Preservation Commission, 7 p.m. And the next committee of the whole is March 13th, at 7 p.m.
We're seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.